Hey everyone! Today I want to talk about what I think is the true horror behind everything happening in Silent Hill F, because the more I looked into the lore surrounding the history of Ibisugoka, the Water Dragon, the Divine Tree, the Sacred Sword, and the Tsukumogami, as well as the real-life Japanese legends and mythology that they were inspired by, the more it completely changed how I was looking at all of this. Because once you take a look at the legend behind the eight-headed dragon, things start to come together in a really interesting way that really caused me to think that maybe these aren't separate mysteries and threats at all. Maybe they're all connected. And if that's true, then I might have figured out who or what the true evil behind the events of Silent Hill F really is. And it may have been hiding in plain sight the entire time. Not the Fox Clan, not Kotoyuki, not the Kyuubi Fox Messenger taking on the role of Inari, but the Water Dragon, or more specifically, what the Water Dragon became. Is Kotoyuki and the Fox Clan really going to ritually sacrifice Hinako after 8 years go by, like the documents and clan notes possibly suggest? What is the real story with that weird and creepy mysterious eyeball tree in New Game Plus that seems haunted by the ghostly cries of the sacrificed Tsuneki brides? And what is the true story behind the Water Dragon, the Divine Tree, and the Tsukumogami? I'll also examine those psychotic killer notes we find throughout the Dark Shrine Otherworld that hint that someone or something could be killing the Tsuneki brides here, right under the Fox Clan's nose. Join me as we explore my final theories for Silent Hill F and take a look at these questions to see if I can finally solve some of the unanswered mysteries that were left by the game. So let's get into it. First of all, I'd like to talk about the Fox Clan and the true sacrifice that Hinako doesn't seem to realize that she is making when she marries Kotoyuki. Throughout the game, we are led to believe that this is about Hinako getting married and being forced to live in a potentially unhappy marriage with Kotoyuki. We see a glimpse of this in the bad ending, with Hinako still in her Shuramuku form living with Kotoyuki, and him stepping on the tiny part of Hinako's inner rebellious self to quiet her. From this, we can assume that Hinako is living in an unhappy and abusive marriage with Kotoyuki, becoming just like her mother. However, when you take a look at the Fox Clan notes, we actually find out that Hinako is the next in line to be sacrificed in a ritual sacrifice and is eventually going to be killed by Kotoyuki, who will seal her mouth with needle and thread, slice open her stomach to clean out her insides, filling it with rice mixed with his saliva, before setting her afloat on a raft of straw as her body sinks into the water's depths deep below to quell the Water Dragon's wrath. It's not made clear if the sacrifice happens right after Hinako gets married, if marrying the woman needs to happen every 8 years, or if the sacrifice is supposed to take place after the 8 years of her being his wife. But it is a nice parallel to the Water Dragon, originally having 8 heads as well when you think about it. It also makes way more sense that the Fox Clan would have to wait 8 years before they sacrifice their wives, so that they can give birth to an heir, so they can continue the family lineage of the Tsuneki clan. The scene with Kotoyuki and Hinako in the bad ending, being married and living together, honestly seems to hint that he hasn't killed and sacrificed Hinako yet. In fact, if we look at the letters Mayumi writes to Hinako after she marries, it seems like Mayumi didn't die right away either, and was actually living within the Dark Shrine Otherworld, at least until the very last letter, which cuts off at the last part, indicating perhaps that she was killed or died as she was writing the letter. I'd also like to mention that her last letter is found in a sealed box right beside the weird spooky living eyeball tree that we come across in New Game Plus, which is a really interesting coincidence that I'll get into more later on, but is a very important detail to remember for later. This 8-year ritual sacrifice means that maybe Hinako isn't meant to die immediately like we are initially led to believe, but is meant to marry Kotoyuki, living with him for 8 years to act as a spiritual anchor and possibly bear his children so that a new heir can be born, and is then killed 8 years later, sacrificed to keep the water dragon at bay and quell its thirst. I'd also like to point out that this sacrifice of killing the Tsuneki brides may have changed over the years as well, as the last note of the clan does mention that a living sacrifice may no longer suffice to keep the water dragon sealed, but they don't specify if this means that they stop sacrificing and killing the women after they are married to them, or if they just delay it and still go through with it 8 years later, after enough time has passed to strengthen the bond and power of the clan before finding the next bride. If they did change the sacrifice though, it does call into question why there is so many women in fox masks standing with their husbands as Hinako walks down the aisle. If the heir to the Fox clan marries a woman and then lives a full married life of 30 to 50 years with her before they die of old age, then there would honestly be no need to find and have so many brides and wives. And when you think about it, we wouldn't see as many during this scene. However, if they have to find a new bride to marry every 8 years, then that would definitely explain all the brides and wives that they've gone through, and all the ones we see during this scene. Does this mean that Hinako doesn't escape tragedy and she just delays it? Will Kotoyuki actually kill Hinako in 8 years and go through this process again of finding a brand new bride? Is this what the Fox clan has done every 8 years? Marrying a woman for 7 to 8 years, then killing them and then finding another one? Or will a different family member be chosen to find yet another girl? Currently unknown, but it does make me wonder about that creepy and seemingly living eyeball tree that we come across hidden away in the dark shrine in New Game Plus, which shows us a grotesque tree made of flesh and eyeballs that move. What if the brides aren't just sacrificed? What if the brides of the Tsunekis are destined to become part of something much larger? Their eyes, flesh, blood, and souls being preserved inside this eyeball tree for eternity. The eyes embedded inside the tree move as if alive and always watching. And if you look around the area and listen closely, you'll actually hear the faint cries and screams of the women surrounding the tree. This means that the tree could be what eventually becomes of the brides after 8 years, when they are sacrificed and killed. Their blood is drained and their eyes are taken out before being stitched closed. The eyes then become part of the tree, their special powerful blood absorbed into the tree, making it a living vessel for the women's spirits and souls that are now forever trapped, not able to move on or be at rest. Instead, these poor women are cursed to be in pain, crying, haunting the tree, and always watching, unable to help or do anything. It strongly suggests that perhaps the Fox clan or something else created this living tree, using the brides as sacrifices, becoming their own twisted version of the Divine Tree, using the bride's spiritual blood and powers to power it and keep the dragon sealed. On the other hand though, if the Fox clan stopped sacrificing women and started marrying them instead, then this tree could be made from the earlier women they spirited away and killed as well. But there's also a much more compelling and likely theory about this eyeball tree that I have, which is even more twisted. But I'll get to that in a bit. Moving on, I'd like to talk about a mysterious force that I think is the real evil behind the Tsukumogami, the Divine Tree, and the Sacred Sword. That evil is the water dragon itself and the effects of its evil essence and corruption. The water dragon is perhaps one of the most mysterious and driving forces behind the events of the game, but we never really see it, and we only ever really hear tell of it through rumors, documents, and notes on the history of Ibisugoka. We don't know if it's real and if the land has always been plagued by geysers and poisonous gas, but we do know that some kind of entity is responsible for it. That means that Inari's clan must be sealing it away, and that the sacrifices they do must work in keeping it sealed. Otherwise, it would have destroyed the village by now. now. This fact is undeniably proven when Hinako doesn't go through with the marriage and the village gets destroyed in some of the endings, and again in the other endings when Hinako does go through with the marriage and the poisonous gases do not destroy the village. In the game, we find out that the villagers started worshipping the Divine Tree sometime after the Water Dragon faith, and that worshipping the Divine Tree was said to be keeping the Water Dragon sealed by absorbing or zapping the evil from the Water Dragon. This happens when a 10-foot-tall monk claimed that the Divine Tree was subduing the Water Dragon and told the villagers to worship the tree because it had zapped the evil and essence from the Water Dragon, keeping it asleep and subdued. But what if the Divine Tree wasn't sealing away the Water Dragon after all? What if it actually became corrupted and overtaken by the evil essence of the Water Dragon, either becoming a new body, power source, or vessel for the Water Dragon instead of what the villagers were led to believe? Since the Divine Tree was the second fate to come after the Water Dragon faith, this means that it was around either during or after the Water Dragon's head fell into the ground. According to Ibisugoka's oldest historical records, the Water Dragon's head is possibly the oldest entity or object of power in the village, having supposedly flown deep into the mountains to the land where Ibisugoka now resides, causing poisonous gas leaks and geysers from the deep underground water stream. When you think about it, this means that the Water Dragon's head had to have fallen deep beneath the ground of the village itself, either before or while the Divine Tree was growing, way before the Taira Clan made the area their home. If the Water Dragon's head landed deep beneath the ground where Ibisugoka resides, and its powerful spiritual essence was able to spread all underground throughout the village, enough to cause poisonous gas and geysers to erupt from it, then it would be very easy to assume that perhaps the Divine Tree would have also been affected by the poison and evil essence from the Water Dragon as well. To me, this strongly suggests that the Water Dragon, being a very old and very powerful evil being, would have certainly been powerful enough to spread its evil and essence throughout the roots of the ground all throughout the village, infecting and possibly being absorbed into the Divine Tree as it was growing as well. This means that the Divine Tree could have ended up absorbing the essence and evil of the Water Dragon, eventually becoming a new vessel or body for the Water Dragon to slowly corrupt and eventually take over. During the game, it seems like the Tsukumogami, Sacred Sword, and the Water Dragon are all separate beings and separate threats. But when you take a look at the real-life legend of Yamata-No-Orochi, things become even more interesting, because in the original legend, the Sacred Sword was actually found inside the stomach of the dragon itself. This means that the sword in Silent Hill F might not just be connected to the Water Dragon, it might have actually came from inside the Water Dragon itself as well. In Japanese mythology and in the game itself, we are told the story of Yamata-No-Orochi, the 8-headed, 8-tailed water dragon that terrorized the land and was eventually defeated by the storm god Susanoo. But here's the really interesting part that they don't mention in the game at all. It is said when the storm god Susanoo cut the Water Dragon open, he actually discovered a sacred and powerful sword deep inside. That sword would later become known as the legendary Kusanagi-no-Tsurugi, aka the Japanese Sword of Emperors, and one of the 3 imperial regalia of Japan. This powerful sword is still known in Japan to this very day, and has been said to be lost and stolen many times throughout history. So, if we go by the original legend, the Sacred Sword isn't something that's separate from the dragon at all. The Sacred Sword actually came from inside the dragon itself, and the connections don't stop there either. In later mythology and legends throughout Japan, that very same sacred sword was said to have resurfaced and become tied to real historical events, especially during the Battle of Dan-no-Ura during the Genpei War in 1185, which was the last major war between the Taira and the Minamoto clans. Yes, the very same ones we hear about in Silent Hill F. According to various rumors and reports, during this naval battle, the Kusanagi-no-Tsurugi sword was actually a symbol of the Minamoto clan's power. As the Taira clan faced defeat, a Taira soldier, fearing the sword's capture, supposedly took the sacred sword, escaping with it and throwing it into the sea, which sparked numerous legends about the sword's fate. What if the sacred sword in Silent Hill F is actually meant to be the Kusanagi sword? If we go by the real myths and legends having influenced Silent Hill F, then that means means that instead of throwing the sword into the sea like in the real legends, in Silent Hill F, a Taira soldier or leader of the Taira clan could have taken the Kusanagi sword with him. Then the Taira clan took his body and sword, brought them both to Ibisugoka, and buried them both at the base of the Divine Tree, the very thing that had absorbed the evil essence from the water dragon. This sword originated from deep inside the eight-headed water dragon and is later corrupted by the Taira clan's hatred and anger. Then it's buried beneath the same location and land where the water dragon's head and evil essence is buried deep underground. This means that Ibisugoka and the Divine Tree becomes the very place where the dragon's original power and the sword's corrupted power meet and merge once again. During Silent Hill F, we are led to believe that the sacred sword's power came from the Taira clan's hatred, their anger and resentment and desire for revenge. But when you bring the Orochi myth into it, with the sword having come from inside the water dragon as well, then that means that the sacred sword could also be carrying a fragment or essence of the water dragon's power. This suggests that the Divine Tree isn't just sitting above one source of power. It's actually sitting above two things that are deeply connected: the water dragon's head and a weapon that might have originally come from it, that has now been corrupted even further by the hatred from the Taira clan. This essentially means that what we're seeing in Silent Hill F isn't just separate forces. It's reuniting two parts from the same evil being, something that was once inside the dragon that was brought back together again. And of course, this means that the closer the pieces are brought back together, the stronger its influence and power becomes again. This means the power corrupting the sword might not just be influenced by the human hatred, resentment, and animosity of the Taira clan itself, but might also be being influenced by something much older, like the water dragon itself. So essentially, without the water dragon, none of this would exist. The water dragon's head is the ancient being beneath Ibisugoka, the source of poison, geysers, and corruption. It's the reason sacrifices are required. It doesn't have a body anymore since its head was cut off and separated from it, which means it needs a new body or a new vessel. We know its head fell deep into the land of the village, spreading its evil essence and poison throughout the land and affecting the whole area. It's also where the sacred sword originally came from if it parallels the Kusanagi-no-Tsurugi myth, and so its evil essence could have spread and taken over the Divine Tree, using it as a new body or source of worship and power. I think there's two possibilities going on here in Ibisugoka. The first possibility is that the Tsukumogami might actually be an avatar of the water dragon itself. Since the water dragon's head is buried deep beneath the village, it's what the dragon's power eventually became, becoming the will and new manifestation of the water dragon itself. The Tsukumogami is what happens when the evil essence of the water dragon's head spreads into the land, infecting the Divine Tree, corrupting the sacred sword, its power mixing with and mutating through centuries of human hatred and resentment from the Taira clan that made it become even more stronger. This means the Tsukumogami is not some unrelated spirit, but a new avatar or evolved manifestation of the water dragon's essence that had accumulated in and around the Divine Tree, using the Divine Tree as its new vessel and body, and also using it as a new source of power and worship to try and get stronger, so it can finally destroy the Fox Clan's ritual and free its head, restoring its full power. Then there's the second possibility, and one that might be even darker when you think about it. What if the Tsukumogami is not just the water dragon's avatar, but actually something new? Not just a dragon or just a spirit, but a new hybrid being that was created when the water dragon's evil essence fused with the human hatred inside the sacred sword, the resentment of the Taira clan, and centuries of human cruelty and suffering. The official novel describes the Tsukumogami that Hinako fights at the end of the game as the Tsukumogami that controls and commands the lesser Tsukumogami in the area, showing that it can possess and control other objects throughout the village. In the novel, Koruyuki also states that objects don't have hearts, that what accumulates in old things can only ever be evil and impurity. He also mentions that even if something possesses them, that its intent is still malicious. He says we call them Tsukumogami and worship them as if they're divine familiars. In the novel, Kotayuki even calls Hinako's doll a familiar of the Tsukumogami, saying that they can only bring evil and chaos, harboring impurity, not holiness, and claims that without a vessel to possess, they are often no more than rotten wood. They can't even move. This means that the Divine Tree and Tsukumogami could not have been some jealous spirit or conscious being of the Divine Tree that chose to subdue the water dragon's evil deep below the village of Ibisugoka to help the villagers. What this really tells us is that the Divine Tree is likely just a huge tree that grew in the village that couldn't move or do much of anything until the water dragon's evil infected and corrupted it. For me, that's a huge sign that the evil being and essence that the Divine Tree supposedly zapped and subdued, the water dragon itself, was what actually had accumulated and possessed the Divine Tree, corrupting it and creating a powerful new hybrid Tsukumogami entity with the will of the water dragon. The Divine Tree, now corrupted and taken over by the water dragon's evil essence, either possesses or manifests as a giant 10-foot tall monk with multiple masks. This monk then lies and tells the villagers to worship the Divine Tree, claiming that it has absorbed the water dragon's evil essence and is keeping it sealed because it's trying to strengthen the water dragon's new body and vessel and regain its power to free its head. More worship equals more spiritual power, and so the more power it accumulates, the greater chance it has of actually breaking free of the seal and completely taking over the tree as its new body, using it as a powerful new source of power and worship. The only reason why the villagers think the Divine Tree is keeping the water dragon sealed is because the monk told them so, and if the monk was a manifestation of the Tsukumogami, then we only have the Tsukumogami's words to go by. And as we know from the game, the Tsukumogami likes to lie, deceive, and manipulate Hinako, Shu, and others. To me, this makes perfect sense, because if you look at old myths as well as old ghost stories and legends of powerful beings like demons, entities, ghosts, or deities, it's often said that when the person or powerful being dies or is sealed away in a specific place or area, that their spirit or evil essence can remain and affect the area itself. The evil essence or spirit can then haunt the area, infecting all around it, leaving a lingering presence and possibly even attaching itself to an object or person in the area to eventually possess or become its new vessel and host. Over time, they then can regain their strength, possessing someone or even merging or using the form of the object that their essence was sealed in to become an even more powerful being. The monk that the villagers see is 10 feet tall and wearing multiple masks, symbolizing the water dragon with its multiple heads and towering presence. The biggest and perhaps most important detail that confirmed this for me was the Tsukumogami boss form that we fight that has 8 arms, just like the 8 heads and 8 tails of the Orochi water dragon. It also has multiple heads, with the one in the middle being the standout, which would represent the real dragon head that was sealed deep beneath the village many ages ago. This would also mean that the Tsukumogami has not gotten powerful or strong enough yet to be able to fully manifest 8 heads like the 8-headed water dragon, but has at least gotten enough power to manifest 8 arms and a few heads right now in its more weakened state. If it had gotten to its full strength, then I honestly think it probably would have eventually gotten 8 heads as well, just like the dragon itself. When the villagers began worshipping the Divine Tree, I think the tree and the Tsukumogami get stronger until it's struck by lightning. But why does the Divine Tree actually get struck by lightning? Well, in the game, we are led to believe that the tree simply got struck by lightning somehow. But if you look deeper in the documents surrounding the red liquid known as the Agura no Hotei-sama, we actually find out that the last time the Agura no Hotei-sama was used was actually rumored to be around the same time that the Divine Tree was struck by lightning. I don't think that's by coincidence either. We know that the Agura no Hotei-sama is a powerful elixir that's said to dispel and eliminate all evil, and that it is so powerful that it can have unintended and horrible consequences if used by humans. In the bad ending of the game, the shrine version of Hinako drinks it, and it works, driving out the Tsukumogami from Hinako's other body, and seemingly destroying this rebellious teenage version of Hinako, or at least reducing her other self to nothing more more than a talking face on the floor. So we've seen how it affects humans, but we don't see how it can possibly affect objects or plants, such as trees. But it having been used around the same time that the Divine Tree was struck by lightning can only mean one thing, that someone tried to use it on the Divine Tree itself. However, trying to cleanse all that corruption and evil would not really remove the evil, especially not when the water dragon's head is still sealed deep beneath the village, but it could have destabilized everything inside the tree itself. The Divine Tree was destroyed, and so the water dragon has lost its new body, its new vessel, and its new source of power and worship. And its avatar, the Tsukumogami, is now much weaker. But now that the Divine Tree was badly damaged, I think some of the evil essence inside of it was able to leak and spread out to the remaining area surrounding the Divine Tree, fusing with all the old tools, dolls, and objects that were left as offerings to the tree, allowing the Tsukumogami to be able to control and use them to manipulate and influence the area and townspeople like Shu and Hinako. There's another piece of huge evidence that is further proof that the water dragon has been using the Divine Tree as its new body and vessel, one that you actually find in the same area that you find the Agura no Hotei-sama. In this area, there's a stone that reads, "Deprived of the water dragon's spirit, the once lush great tree has met a withering fate." This great tree they are talking about has to be the Divine Tree, and according to this note, the water dragon's spirit and essence was keeping the Divine Tree alive and growing until the Agura no Hotei-sama was used on it to get rid of the water dragon spirit possessing it. This caused the Divine Tree to get struck by lightning and is now a shell of its former self that is burned and withered now that the water dragon spirit is subdued or weakened after having lost its new body and vessel. Next, I'd like to talk about the Tsukumogami's true motivations and goals. We learn that the Tsukumogami supposedly resents the Inari faith because the villagers abandoned the Divine Tree and began worshipping Inari-sama instead, but I don't think that's the real truth. It's always seemed weird that the true motivation behind the Tsukumogami wanting to stop the marriage and Fox Clan is just because it resents the Inari faith for getting the villagers to abandon the Divine Tree, and because it wants the Divine Tree to be worshipped again. I mean, yes, this would be the case if the water dragon is using the Divine Tree as its new body and source of power. Then worshipping it might give it back its strength, but the Divine Tree is burnt and heavily damaged. So even if the Fox Clan leave the village and the marriage is stopped, there's no way to guarantee that the villagers will actually worship the Divine Tree again. In fact, as the researchers' notes explain, the villagers would likely just go on to worshipping the next oldest thing, which would likely be the sacred sword or something else. However, there is one thing that is fully guaranteed to happen if the Tsukumogami stops or prevents the marriage, and that is the water dragon's full power and head would finally be unleashed, which I think is the true goal of the Tsukumogami. The novel further gives proof of this because it also mentions that the Tsukumogami fears the rare blood that Hinako has from entering the Tsuneki's clan, which would amplify their might and power, meaning they would be able to continue to seal away the water dragon and its full power for many years to come. He also confirms that this has happened before, that whenever their clan holds an important ritual or ceremony, that something tries to interfere. This tells me that the true force behind the Tsukumogami and the Divine Tree is none other than the water dragon, and that stopping Hinako's wedding was never just about revenge against the Fox Clan. Hinako's marriage is part of a huge system that's keeping the water dragon sealed, so if the wedding succeeds, then the seal continues, the Fox Clan remains strong, and the water dragon's head stays sealed beneath the village. The Tsukumogami, the water dragon's new avatar, remains incomplete, trapped in a now weakened and destroyed vessel, the Divine Tree. But if the wedding fails, then the ritual is broken, the bloodline weakens, the seal fails, and the water dragon's true power can be fully unleashed so it can destroy the village and find a new body and vessel. This brings us to perhaps the biggest revelation yet that ties back to those creepy but fascinating messy scrawls and notes that we find in the early parts of the Dark Shrine Otherworld and the horrifying otherworldly eyeball tree that I talked about earlier. During the game in the Dark Shrine Otherworld, you come across these weird and psychotic messy scrawls and ancient notes of someone or something talking about killing and sacrificing the women or wives of the Fox Clan, mentioning that they can't wait to tear the masks off them and hear their screams. At this point in the game, we are led to believe that these might be the twisted musings of Kotayuki or even the Kyuubi, his ancestor, but we don't actually find out who they're from. To me, it seems weird that they mention removing the fox mask from these women, when the Kyuubi and Fox Clan go through so much effort to get each bride to remove and fuse the fox mask to their faces. Furthermore, I noticed that whenever you find these notes, it's right next to or around in very close proximity to where Hinako's celluloid doll is either sitting or warning her about the fox mask. This seems like a deliberate environmental storytelling tactic to me that majorly hints that the Tsukumogami has written these notes, and that the Tsukumogami might actually have manifested here or maybe even took possession of someone, killing some of the Fox Clan's wives in the past, possibly even Mayumi, since the last letter you find from her where her text gets abruptly cut off is actually found right next to the eyeball tree in one of those Inari boxes. There's also the horrifying eyeball tree hidden in an area of the Dark Shrine that seems to be some sort of replica or replacement for the Divine Tree, but this time twisted in a mass of flesh, blood, and eyeballs, with eyes actually embedded into the tree itself and seemingly alive. I mentioned before that I think the tree is made up of the sacrificed women and brides of the Tsuneki clan that could have been made by the Fox Clan. However, I believe that there's actually a better theory here that makes way more sense. My final theory is that the Tsukumogami is actually the one that wrote these notes and is secretly murdering all the wives of the Tsuneki family as revenge, using their eyeballs, powerful blood, flesh, and souls to create a twisted new living version of the Divine Tree that is being powered by and haunted by the spirits and souls of the Tsuneki wives. We do know that the water dragon originally fed off and took great pleasure in killing and sacrificing women, so if the Tsukumogami is an avatar or a manifestation of the water dragon, or even a new being created by the evil from the water dragon, then it makes sense that the Tsukumogami would also have this insatiable appetite for young women as well. It's taking pleasure in killing and sacrificing these women, not only to try to feed and strengthen its power, but also to get revenge against the Inari clan that has used these women to keep its true power subdued for so long. If the Tsuneki brides strengthen the Fox Clan, maintain the ritual, and carry the special powerful blood that is said to strengthen the bond between gods and mortals and the spirit world, then their role is directly tied to helping the Fox Clan preserve the seal of the water dragon's head. Then this means to the Tsukumogami, they are not just victims, they are incredibly valuable. They can become fuel, valuable resources, and a new source of power for it. Killing them weakens Inari's control, the eyeball tree being a replacement for the Divine Tree and directly tying into the murders of the Tsuneki brides connects everything back together with the Tsukumogami. I think it's a deliberate setup and a major clue left by Ryokishi that tells us that the eyeball tree and those ancient notes do have a purpose and a motive. The Divine Tree was damaged, meaning that the Tsukumogami and Water Dragon has lost its new source of power, its new body where its essence and power had been absorbed, where it was being strengthened by the worship and offerings of the villagers. It needs a new one. So if the Tsukumogami can't stop the marriage between these women to the Tsuneki Fox Clan to unseal and free the water dragon's head and unleash its full power once more, then it needs to create a new anchor, a new body and living vessel to replace the Divine Tree and strengthen itself again in the Dark Shrine Otherworld. This time one built for itself using the perfect sacrifice, the Tsuneki brides. So the Tsukumogami lurks, waiting in the Dark Shrine Otherworld, and sneaks in, deciding to use the Tsuneki wives, eventually killing them and making them the perfect sacrifice to sustain their hunger, and to build and create a new powerful Divine Tree. This explains why the Tsukumogami would embed their eyes into the tree itself. Eyes often symbolize souls, identity, spiritual awareness, and by using their eyes, the Tsukumogami is binding their souls, spirit, and identity directly into the tree, turning them into a living vessel. That's why the eyes move, that's why we hear the cries of the women echoing around it. The spirits of the Tsuneki wives are still there, their souls trapped and bound to this new eyeball tree. When you think about the psychotic notes we find, it never made sense for the person writing these to be the Kyuubi, Kotayuki, or any previous member of the Tsuneki Fox Clan, because why would they go through all the effort of going through with those rituals, getting these women to cut off their faces and replace replace them with a fox mask, only for them to rip it off later? By tearing off the fox masks from these women, it is literally undoing and sabotaging the fox ritual, which would only make sense if it was the Tsukumogami itself that was the real killer, the real threat to the Fox clan and the Tsuneki wives. The disturbing notes, hearing the women screaming, enjoying the killing, that has to be the Tsukumogami sadistically harvesting, dismantling the fox ritual, removing Inari's control, and taking the brides for itself, gathering them and building its own new living vessel to replace the Divine Tree. Only this time the Tsukumogami doesn't need to have the villagers worshipping this new twisted version of the Divine Tree to strengthen it or give it more power. This time the tree itself is the battery, a living power source and vessel, powered by the blood, flesh, eyes, spirits, and suffering of the Tsuneki wives that will eventually allow the Tsukumogami and Water Dragon's power to grow strong enough to break the Fox clan seal over it. If this is true, then that makes the good ending even more darker than we originally thought, because when Hinako leaves with Shu, his voice distorts and changes for just a few brief moments, revealing to us that Shu is still being possessed by the Tsukumogami and has now attached itself to him. This means that in the good ending, that Hinako might not actually escape the ritual sacrifice at all, but will eventually be the Tsukumogami's next victim, as Shu, under the influence of the Tsukumogami, will likely end up killing Hinako, eventually adding her eyes, blood, and soul to the new Divine Tree it created in the Dark Shrine Otherworld to further power the Water Dragon's new body and avatar, just like all the other Tsuneki wives. Well, it's been a long time coming, but those are my final theories on all of the unanswered questions left by Silent Hill F. Do you think the Tsukumogami is the Water Dragon's avatar, or do you think it became something even worse? What do you guys think the weird and creepy eyeball tree could be? Do you think it's a new living vessel and replacement using the Tsuneki wives? And who do you think is responsible for it? The Tsuneki grooms, the Kyuubi, or the Tsukumogami? Do you think it has anything to do with those psychotic notes and messy scrawls that you find in the Dark Shrine Otherworld? What do you guys think about these theories? Do you agree with any of them or have any interesting theories of your own? Please let me know your thoughts and theories in the comments below. I'd really love to hear them. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more game theories and analysis of your favorite games, please be sure to like, subscribe, and let me know. You can also check out my analysis and theory for Silent Hill: The Short Message here. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you all have a great day. Take care, and I'll see you all next time.